I never expected working the graveyard shift at a small-town diner to be anything but routine. The kind of place where time seemed to freeze, where the day's worries melted into the clinking of coffee cups and the sizzle of eggs on a worn-out grill. The diner's neon sign flickered faintly in the pre-dawn darkness, casting a ghostly glow over the empty parking lot. It was the kind of night that stretched forever, quiet, still, and slightly cold. The diner itself was an unassuming relic from another era. Its walls were lined with faded photos of smiling families, long-gone regulars, and local fishing competitions. The booths had vinyl cracked from decades of use, and the air carried the faint smell of frying bacon mixed with the musk of old linoleum. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, struggling to move the stagnant night air. That particular night, I was the only one on shift, just me, the flickering fluorescent lights, and the faint hum of the refrigerators. It was around 2:10 IOM when the bell above the door rang softly, cutting through the silence. I glanced up, expecting to see one of the usual night owls, truck drivers, insomniacs, or the occasional lonely soul seeking a late snack. But this visitor was different. He was tall, impossibly pale, as if he'd been drained of color by the very air he breathed. His clothes were threadbare, yet oddly formal. A worn charcoal gray suit with a thin black tie slightly askew. His shoes were scuffed, but silent on the floor. There was an unsettling stillness about him, like he had stepped out of another time. What struck me most were his eyes. They didn't look at me, not really. Instead, they seemed unfocused, like they were gazing beyond the walls of the diner, past the streetlights and into some distant, unreachable place. His gaze was hollow but intense, like he was both here and somewhere else all at once. He moved slowly to the counter and pointed at a steaming pot of coffee. I poured him a cup, black, no cream, no sugar. Without a word, he took the mug and shuffled toward the back corner booth, the one that was dimly lit and usually empty. As he sat down, the quiet returned, heavy and expectant. Minutes ticked by. I busied myself wiping down the counter and restocking napkins, but I kept stealing glances toward the booth. That's when I noticed he'd begun whispering to himself. At first, the words were faint, barely audible above the hum of the old refrigerator. They sounded like fragments of an unknown language, disjointed phrases that twisted and curled like smoke. His lips moved in soft, trembling murmurs, but the words made no sense. Curiosity mixed with unease as I approached him cautiously. "Can I get you anything else?" I asked, voice low. He lifted his eyes briefly, but they still didn't focus. Instead, he shook his head slowly, almost mechanically, and went back to whispering. His fingers curled around the coffee cup so tightly that the knuckles turned white. Time passed. The diner grew colder, as if the warmth was being sucked out by some invisible force. When my break came, I told my coworker to keep an eye on the strange man and stepped outside for some fresh air, the chilly night pressing against my skin. When I returned, I walked quietly toward the corner booth, but it was empty. No sign of the man. No jacket hung on the chair, no belongings left behind. Just an empty cup still steaming faintly, and a lingering scent like damp earth and old smoke. I searched the diner, the parking lot, even the empty street outside, but he was gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The rest of my shift felt surreal, like I was trapped in some half-remembered dream. I kept glancing back at the booth, half expecting him to materialize again from the shadows. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I asked around, my regular customers, the truck drivers who stopped by at night, the elderly man who came in every morning at dawn for his black coffee, if anyone recognized the pale, whispering man. No one did. But then I spoke with Mr. Hawthorne, a grizzled old man with deep-set eyes and a voice like gravel. His gaze darkened when I described the figure. "That sounds like the ghost who died here years ago," he said quietly, leaning in close as if the walls might overhear. "Right here, in this very diner." He told me the story, something I'd only heard in whispered rumors. Many years ago, a man had collapsed right there in the corner booth during a late-night visit. The doctors said it was a heart attack, but locals whispered that he'd been haunted by something darker, some curse or unfinished business that chained his soul to this place. His last wish, the legend went, was for a final cup of coffee. Black, bitter, just like the ones we serve now. Since then, many swear his spirit lingers, restless and lost, doomed to wait through endless nights for that elusive final sip. I tried to laugh it off, to convince myself it was just a ghost story spun from too many lonely nights and too much caffeine. But every time the clock neared 2 a.m., I found myself drawn to the empty booth, my skin trickling, my breath catching in my throat. Sometimes, just out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw that pale figure flicker, a shadow sitting silently, whispering to himself in an ancient, forgotten tongue. The diner feels different now. The lights flicker a little more often, the coffee tastes colder, and on the loneliest nights, I swear I can hear the soft tapping of a coffee cup against the table, waiting for the last drink to be finished. The stretch of highway where Maggie's Diner stood was a forgotten road, one that few took unless they had a reason. The town nearby had been vibrant decades ago, but over the years it dwindled, its population thinning like autumn leaves. Maggie's Diner, with its blinking neon sign and vintage charm, was one of the last remnants of that fading era. The diner had been there since the 1950s, a gleaming beacon for travelers and locals alike. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong and bitter just how you liked it, and the pie was always fresh and thick with fruit. It was a home away from home for many, myself included. Friday nights there were a sacred ritual for my friends and me. The drive out felt like a mini adventure, a chance to escape the grinding routine of our daily lives. The diner's interior was almost painfully nostalgic. Vinyl booths lined the walls, scarred and sticky in places from years of spilled drinks and careless patrons. The walls were papered with cracked black and white photographs of classic cars, movie stars with perfect smiles frozen in time, and long-gone diners bustling with crowds. The air smelled of fried food and brewing coffee, mixed with a faint, musty undertone that spoke of age and secrets. We always claimed the booth by the window, a battered red vinyl seat that creaked when you sat in it and had a stubborn stain or two from years past. It was a small comfort, a touchstone of familiarity. One Friday night, everything changed. We piled into the booth, joking and laughing like we always did, but as I slid down into the seat, my eye caught something new. Something I was sure hadn't been there before. A dark stain, deep red and crusted, spread unevenly across the worn vinyl of the seat. It looked like dried blood, old and almost baked into the material. I leaned closer, heart pounding a little faster. The stain seemed almost to throb under the flickering neon light, its edges sharp and jagged like veins twisting outward. My friends noticed too. A hush fell over our table as we exchanged uneasy glances. When the waitress, Linda, came by, I couldn't hold back my curiosity. "Hey, what's up with that stain? Looks like blood," I nodded toward the booth. Linda's face went pale. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the rag she was holding. "That's been there a long time," she said quietly, voice strained. "Nobody talks about it much." I pressed, asking if she knew how it got there, but she shook her head, eyes darting to the back room as if afraid someone might overhear. "Some things," she whispered, "are better left forgotten." The atmosphere shifted after that. The usual din of chatter and laughter grew subdued, the other customers avoiding the stained booth as if it were contagious. The jukebox music slowed, songs turning somber and almost mournful. That night, as the clock edged toward midnight, the cook, Joe, a grizzled man with years of stories etched into his face, burst out of the kitchen, his expression pale and shaking. "I'm done," he said hoarsely. "I can't stay here. I saw something in the kitchen. Something wrong." Linda looked terrified. "What was it, Joe?" He swallowed hard. "A shadow. A shape with no face. Moving between the pots and pans like it was alive. But it shouldn't have been there." The tension in the diner snapped like a wire. The staff began closing early for the first time in years. The few customers shuffled out quietly, casting nervous glances toward the darkened kitchen and the blood-stained booth. The next morning, curiosity gnawed at me like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I drove by Maggie's early, sunlight filtering through the overgrown weeds surrounding the building. Peering in through the grimy window, I saw that the stain had changed. It had spread. Dark tendrils crept out from beneath the booth, snaking like living veins across the cracked linoleum floor. The edges pulsed faintly, as if the stain itself had a heartbeat. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, that the stain was just an old mess bleeding into the worn vinyl and floor. But deep down, I knew. That stain wasn't just a mark. It was something alive. Something waiting. The days that followed brought strange rumors. Townsfolk whispered of strange happenings around the diner, the flicker of lights late at night, the sudden chill that settled like a ghostly breath in empty rooms, and eerie scraping noises echoing from within. One night, my friend Mark, ever the skeptic, decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a foolish bravado, he snuck into the diner after hours. He never spoke about what he saw, but the haunted look in his eyes told its own story. Days later, he left town without a word. The diner closed soon after. The neon sign fizzled out, the windows boarded up, and Maggie's became just another forgotten relic swallowed by time and silence. But on quiet nights, when the wind carries a certain mournful wail, I swear I can hear the scrape of claws against linoleum. And if I'm alone in the dark, sometimes I see it dark red veins, spreading, pulsing under my skin, a reminder that some stains never truly fade away. The road was empty and endless, a dark ribbon winding through dense forests that swallowed sound and light alike. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway and the fading daylight dragging me deeper into exhaustion. My muscles ached, my eyelids grew heavy, and the cold breath of night began creeping over the landscape as the sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, I spotted a flickering neon sign, its sputtering glow a small beacon in the vast emptiness. The sign simply read, "Diner," its faded letters buzzing softly in the growing twilight. Desperate for a break, some food, and a hot drink, I turned off the highway and pulled into the cracked parking lot of the rundown establishment. The diner looked like it had been forgotten by time, a relic from decades past with peeling paint, rusty gutters, and windows clouded by grime and age. Despite its worn-down appearance, warm yellow light spilled from inside, promising shelter from the creeping cold. I stepped inside and was immediately hit by the thick smell of fried grease, bitter coffee, and something darker. An indistinct scent that set my nerves on edge. The room was small and dimly lit, filled with cracked vinyl booths and a long counter lined with chipped chrome stools. Old black and white photographs and faded advertisements clung to the walls, their edges curling like dead leaves. A low murmur of conversation mixed with the soft clatter of dishes created a muted soundtrack, but the atmosphere felt heavy, weighted with something unspoken. Behind the counter stood a waitress, thin and pale, with sharp cheekbones that seemed to catch the dim light like shadows. Her eyes were unsettling, ice-butte and glassy, and her smile was slow, measured, and didn't quite reach them. Without a word, she handed me a laminated menu that was yellowed and brittle at the edges, its plastic cracked from years of use. I opened it cautiously and immediately felt a chill crawl up my spine. The menu was unlike any I had seen before. Instead of familiar dishes, it was filled with strange, cryptic names written in jagged, red-tinged ink that shimmered faintly in the low light. The words seemed almost alive, as if they were whispering dark secrets beneath the surface. I read through the unsettling offerings. Midnight stew, a thick black broth said to warm the soul but chill the blood. Shadow pie, described as a crust filled with whispers and folded darkness baked beneath layers of forgotten fears. The silent roast, meat slow cooked in silence and seasoned with the essence of lost voices. Veil of ash, a dessert dusted with remnants of burned memories, sweet and bitter all at once. And a dish called Eater of Dreams, promising fulfillment but demanding a terrible price. I looked up from the menu, my heart suddenly racing, to meet the waitress's cold gaze. She leaned in slightly and whispered, barely audible, "Choose carefully. Some dishes come with a price." A nervous laugh escaped me, brittle and forced. "I think I'll just stick to a coffee and a burger," I said quickly, desperate to break the tension. She gave a barely perceptible nod and glided away to tend to other customers. The rest of the diner felt normal enough. Old music playing softly from a jukebox, muted conversations, and the occasional clatter of silverware. But beneath it all, I sensed a restless unease, like the place was holding its breath, waiting. I ate quickly, my appetite gone, and left as soon as I could. The cold night air hit me like a shock, crisp and sharp, but the relief was brief. That night, I set up my tent in a small clearing a few miles down the road beneath towering pine trees that swayed in the wind. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant hoots of owls, and the soft whisper of the breeze. But sleep was elusive. My mind churned with uneasy thoughts, haunted by the strange menu and the waitress's warning. My dreams were fragmented and disturbing, shadows shifting just beyond vision, faint voices speaking in languages I couldn't understand, and that crimson ink crawling across the pages like living veins. When dawn finally arrived, I awoke with an odd sensation crawling over my skin. Pulling back my sleeves, I froze. Dark bruises mottled my arms, swirling in strange, intricate patterns that looked almost like symbols or runes. The purples and blues were deep and vivid, unlike any bruise I'd ever seen. They were cold to the touch, yet seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive beneath my skin. Panic gripped me. I couldn't explain how they had appeared overnight, nor why the patterns looked so deliberate, as though marking me with some unseen brand. The whispers began soon after, faint at first, like a breath on the edge of hearing. They grew steadily louder with each passing night, murmuring secrets I couldn't quite grasp, calling my name softly in voices both foreign and familiar. The bruises spread slowly, creeping up my arms and darkening with a life of their own, while my reflection in mirrors warped and shimmered, flickering between my face and a shadowed, distorted form with hollow eyes. I stopped telling people, afraid they would think I was losing my mind, yet the shadows around me thickened, twitching at the edge of vision and retreating whenever I looked directly. One night, compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, I returned to the diner. It was dark and silent, the neon sign flickering weakly before sputtering out completely. Pressing my ear to the window, I heard faint tapping, like fingernails drumming on wood, and low murmurs from within. I found a side door slightly ajar, revealing a narrow staircase descending into pitch-black darkness. Heart pounding, I shone my phone's flashlight down the steps. The air was thick and cold, smelling of decay and forgotten things. Dried blood symbols were scrawled on the walls, twisted and ancient. From the shadows came a low growl that froze me in place. Terrified, I fled back into the night, vowing never to return. Since then, the marks have continued to spread, and the voices will not leave me alone. They beckon me, whispering promises and threats, demanding I return and pay the price. I don't know what the dishes on that cursed menu truly were, or what dark hunger they fed. All I know is that some menus are not meant to be read, and some meals do not just fill your stomach. They consume your very soul. If the spectral whispers of the late-night customer, the creeping dread of the Bloodstain Booth, and the cursed hunger of the menu that changed left you side-eyeing your midnight coffee, welcome to the greasy underbelly of diner horror, where neon flickers like a dying heartbeat, booths hold memories darker than burnt toast, and the specials always come with a side of terror. Before you settle your tab, slam that like button if these tales turned your appetite to ash, share this video with anyone brave enough to order the Veil of Ash, and subscribe to chew on the horrors lurking behind every grease-stained menu. Every click is a bell jingling on the diner door, a promise that the next nightmare is already on the grill. Now the question sizzles. Have you tasted it too? The coffee that's colder than the grave? The booth stain that pulses like a wound? Maybe you've met a waitress with eyes like frozen oil, or glimpsed a shadowed cook flipping patties in the backroom void. Whether it's a menu written in blood ink, a customer who vanishes with the dawn, or a milkshake that whispers your name, spill it. Slide your story into the comments, or send it folded in a napkin. Your encounter could be the next item on our cursed menu, or the secret ingredient we've been missing. To those already glued to the countertop of curiosity, ring the bell to never miss a midnight special. Follow us into the flicker of the neon on social media, where we dissect haunted hash browns, decode phantom pie recipes, and dare to ask, what's really in the chili? Check the description for links, eerie diner blueprints, and a map to the darkest booths, if you're hungry enough to pull up a seat. As the jukebox wheezes its last tune and the coffee turns to tar, remember this. Diners aren't pit stops, they're purgatory. The stains on the vinyl, the shadow in the kitchen, the menu that chooses you. They've been waiting since the first fryer hissed. The line between order up and never leave is as thin as a grease-smeared window, and in the dark, it cracked. So check your reflection in the coffee spoon. Count the exits twice, and if the pie tastes like regret, don't finish it. The night is alive with short-order cooks, and some recipes demand more than cash. Until next time, night owls and road warriors, may your coffee stay hot, your booths stay empty, and your milkshakes stay silent. But if they don't, we'll be here, scribbling your name on the check.